Like a number of Jorge Luis Borges' short stories, The Garden of Forking Paths is complex and contains a story within another story, and in many respects, they're of different types. So the outer shell of the story, the official narrative that's going on, is what we could call a spy or secret agent story. And Borges is, sort of following in the footsteps of people who he likes, like Conrad and Chesterton and others in that respect. But there's I won't even call it a kernel because it occupies roughly half of the narrative. There's a different story inside, which is, you could call it an intellectual detective or scholarly fiction or philosophical fiction story that is nested within, which has important implications for the outer story as well. And that is going to be the inner story about the labyrinth of Tsun's great ancestor, who created a novel that functions as a labyrinth and as a model of the universe and of time. So we're going to talk about that a bit more deeply elsewhere. Let's focus on the outer story, which has its own charm as well. So we have this guy, Yu Tsun, who has a mission. He is actually a secret agent. He is to communicate the secret, in capital letters, of a military nature to the German authorities. And so we find out that he's an agent of the German Empire. This is during World War I, and he is supposed to find where an artillery park on the Ankh is, the name of the exact location of it. What is an artillery park? Well, it's where a whole bunch of artillery is gathered, perhaps ammunition as well. And so if they can destroy this is going to be a setback to the Allies and a victory or a preparation for victory for the Central Powers, Germany being the most important of those. And he pictures this bird as an airplane, and that airplane into many in the French sky, annihilating the artillery park with vertical bombs. If only my throat, before a bullet crushed it, could cry out that name so it might be heard in Germany. So he's got a problem. How do I communicate this secret? And what is his goal here? Why is he doing this? It's not for the greater glory of Germany or anything like that. He says, I did not do it for Germany. What do I care for a barbaric country that has forced me to the ignominy of spying? Furthermore, I know of a man of England, a modest man, who in my view is no less a genius than Goethe. I spoke with him for no more than an hour, but for an hour he was Goethe. And we're going to meet that man, Albert, shortly. He says, no, I did it because I sensed the leader look down on the people of my race, the countless ancestors whose blood flows through my veins. I wanted to prove to him that a yellow man could save his armies. So he's not doing it out of any sort of German patriotism. In a way, you could say it's Chinese patriotism, but it's something having to do more with his culture and not with the country itself. So this is going to require escaping from somebody who is on his tail, Captain Richard Madden. And we learn a little bit about him as well in the very first paragraph. He says, Madden was implacable, or rather, he was obliged to be implacable. An Irishman at the orders of the English, a man accused of a certain lack of zealousness, perhaps even treason. How could he fail to embrace and give thanks for this miraculous favor? The discovery, capture, perhaps death of two agents of the German Empire. The first agent, Runeberg, has already been caught. How does Tsun know this? Because Madden's voice is on the end of Runeberg's telephone. He's like, whoop, game is up. So now he has to escape Madden. And he's not going to be able to escape him in the sense of not facing any consequences. But if he can communicate his message before Madden gets a hold of him, actually it's going to turn out to be after Madden gets a hold of him, then he is succeeding in his mission, and although he's going to die, Tsun will have vindicated himself. At the same time, he's going to have to do something which he calls a horrendous act, an horrendous undertaking. And so he escapes Madden. He gets on this train to go to the village of Ashgrove and visit Albert. He sees Madden there. Madden doesn't catch the train. So he says, I told myself my duel had begun in dodging my adversary's thrust. Even by 40 minutes, thanks to this slightest smile from fate, the first round had gone to me. I argued this small win prefigured total victory. I argued the win was not really even so small, since without the precious hour the trains had given me, I'd be in jail or dead. I argued no less sophistically, notice that parentheses there, that my cowardly cheerfulness proved I was a man capable of following this adventure through to its successful end. From that weakness, I drew strength that was never to abandon me. Why does he need this strength? I foresee that mankind will resign itself more and more fully every day to more and more horrendous undertakings. Soon there will be nothing but warriors and brigands. I give them this piece of advice. He who is to perform a horrendous act should imagine to himself that it is already done, should impose upon himself a future as irrevocable as the past. Now, there's an interesting metaphysics there. We can choose how we look at the future, which typically we see as full of possibilities. But this is saying, no, I picture the horrendous act as already done, so I need to move towards it irrevocably. I cannot do otherwise. Our will imposes a solidity upon the future that it doesn't actually possess. So he travels, and we get an account of going to the house of the sinologist, Dr. Stephen Albert, the man he calls Goethe. And how does he get there? He has to go through something that is like a maze. These boys tell him the house is a far way, but you'll not get lost if you follow that road there to the left and turn left at every crossing. And he's going to say the boy's advice to turn always to the left reminded me that was the common way of discovering the central lawn of a certain kind of maze. I am somewhat of a connoisseur of mazes. And why is he a connoisseur of mazes? Not for nothing am I the great-grandson of that Ts'ui Pen, who was governor of Yunnan province, and who renounced all temporal power in order to write a novel containing more characters than the Hung Lu Meng and construct a labyrinth in which all men would lose their way. And we find out that both of these were kind of a failure. The novel doesn't really make sense. He never created a labyrinth as far as anybody can see. And he's the character, Tsun, says, I imagined a labyrinth of labyrinths, a maze of mazes, a twisting, turning, ever-widening labyrinth that contained both past and future, and somehow implied the stars. Absorbed in those illusory imaginings, I forgot I was a pursued man. I felt myself for an indefinite while the abstract perceiver of the world. The evening was near yet infinite. Then he meets up with Albert. And Albert receives him. He's a sinologist, means he studies China. He's actually been a missionary before that. So he, is very, very interested in all things pertaining to one of the most ancient cultures in continuity, on Earth. And Albert is going to actually reveal the labyrinth to Tsun and explain to him that his ancestor didn't actually do two different projects and fail at them both. He succeeded in engaging in just one particular project, creating a novel which itself is a labyrinth. The Garden of Forking Paths is that novel, but it's also, as we're going to find out, that it is, as he says, an incomplete but not false image of the universe. So by telling a certain kind of narrative, he provides a philosophical take on how things actually are in this entire world. And not just at this point in time. Time is going to be an absolutely central part of it. The forking paths are not just in space, or even primarily in space. They are in time. And what we get here, I don't want to linger on this too long, but I will say this, is a very interesting model that is different than linear time, different than cyclical time, because it's much more complicated. It is indeed a labyrinth, a maze, where times diverge but also come back together at certain points. So Albert, who's translated the Garden of Forking Paths, is going to explain to Yu Tsun what this model actually is and what the implications are for them. So he's going to tell him that, here we go, your ancestor did not believe in a uniform and absolute time. He believed in an infinite series of times, a growing, dizzying web of divergent, convergent, and parallel times. The fabric of times that approach one another, fork, are snipped off, or are simply unknown for centuries, contains all possibilities. In most of those times, so it's about individuals, we do not exist. In some, you exist, but I do not. In others, I do, and you do not. In others still, we both do, which would include the one that's being narrated here. In this one, which the favoring hand of chance has dealt me, you have come to my home. In others, when you come through my garden, you will find me dead. In another, I will say these same words, but I am an error and a ghost. And he goes on a little bit. Time forks perpetually into countless futures. In one of them, I am your enemy. And as it's going to turn out, in some respects, he is a friend and an enemy at the same time. Madden has found him. Madden is approaching. And Tsun is going to ask Albert for the letter again. Albert will turn around, and then with utmost care I fired. Albert fell without a groan, without a sound on the instant. I swear he died instantly. One clap of thunder. Now, why did Tsun kill this man with whom he's had this massively important conversation, both, you could say, in terms of the entirety of the universe and in terms of his own ancestor and the meaning of his life? Because Albert is being turned into a mode of communication by which the leader, the sort of spy ringmaster, can pore through the newspapers and decipher the message that Yu Tsun is sending him about the artillery park. And we read at the end, yesterday it was bombed. I read about it in the same newspapers that pose to all of England the enigma of the murder of the eminent sinologist Stephen Albert by a stranger, Yu Tsun. The leader solved the riddle. He knew that my problem was how to report over the deafening noise of the war the name of the city called Albert. And the only way I could find was by murdering a person of that name. And then it finishes, he does not know, no one can know, of course, except for us, the readers, my endless contrition and my weariness. And that is where the story ends. So we see the horrendous deed has been committed, a particular future, now past in the novel, or the short story rather, has been selected and seen through. And that is the outer level of the story of the Garden of Forking Paths.